So, and I appreciate you inviting me to come. You know, there is that story about the man who was in the hospital and got the tragic news that he only had about 20 minutes left to live. And the doctor asked if he wanted a priest, and he said, "No, get me an economist." And the doctor was very surprised and said, "Why do you want an economist?" And he said, "Well, an economist can make 20 minutes seem like a lifetime." So we'll try to get through the next 20 minutes. And I noticed the agenda has the Q&A in about 20 minutes from now, but I think we're a small enough group, just, as we go along, just ask a question or speak up. I'll also confess, I'm happy to be here. I love Westport. I thank you for having a 10:30 meeting, because the last time I was in Westport, it was for a breakfast meeting, and I live in Coventry, so that was a little rough, but it's okay, I made it. And I usually speak to job seekers and folks who are trying to get back into the labor force, or sometimes like a trade association where they want to know what's happening in their own industry. So this is a little different from me, talk about demographics. So I was very interested, me pulling out all the data. We'll see if it's interesting to you, but we'll see. So just want to acknowledge that whoever, I don't know enough about Westport, I didn't do any research, but we know there were people here before us, and we want to honor their stewardship of the land. And let's get into it. So I am from the Labor Department, so we're going to talk about employment first, and then we'll get into the demographic stuff. And I am so happy to be in person. And it's funny, this is still happening. In fact, one of you told me you were going off to a Zoom meeting, leaving early for a Zoom meeting. So it's still happening. And I was at a meeting yesterday where somebody couldn't get in, and this and that. It's still going on. Still going on. All right. So this is just the structure of employment in Connecticut and in Fairfield County. So healthcare is the largest industry. It is in almost every state. I mean, it's just, healthcare is employs a lot of people. I find it interesting, even, this is actually a switcheroo from the past few years. Finance and insurance traditionally had a higher employment level in Fairfield County than manufacturing, and they've now switched places. Finance, unfortunately, is just continuing to shrink jobs statewide and in Fairfield County, although very high-paying jobs. So it's still a very, very important part of our economy, but from a total employment perspective, getting smaller, and I think most of that is driven by technology. I mean, my first job out of college was, yes?
Patrick, just people can't really read this. Just to say that we will be sharing the slides.
I'll have to share the slides. Yeah, everybody. It's funny. I should have talked about. I wouldn't have done the widescreen thing if I'd known the screen was going to be set up like this. I would have done the narrower slides. But whatever. We're here.
Yeah.
So this is total employment in Fairfield County. Healthcare, retail, education, accommodation, and food service are the top four industries in terms of total employment. And this is the change in total employment since 2019. So 2019 was the last year before the pandemic. We obviously have fewer jobs today than we did then by a little bit in 2022. The first 6 months of 23, we're actually picking up jobs. I just don't have that data by county yet, so I only have data through the end of 2022. Interesting. Compared to 2019, we have more people today working in social assistance in Fairfield County, and then professional and scientific services, and then transportation and warehousing, which is just a long-term trend that accelerated during the pandemic. The smiley boxes come to my house too. We're all part of that. And then this decline in retail is sort of the offset of that. Some of this is still pandemic related, but retail has been in long-term decline for a while. It is still very large. In fact, there was a report, oh, he's gone. There was a report, oh, he's in the back now. There was a story in the Harvard Business Journal about the retail apocalypse, which was completely exaggerated. I mean, it had lost some jobs, but it's still 240,000 jobs statewide. It's still a very large sector. And as I said, I talk to job seekers all the time, and if you're a young person still in high school, looking for your first job, retail is still an excellent place to get started. All right, so now let's talk about the demographics of employment. So this is the structure of Fairfield County employment by industry and by sex. So healthcare and social assistance, very female dominated. Manufacturing, 2-to-1 male. Construction, maybe 3 or 4-to-1 male. So it's interesting, I guess, maybe a little frustrating for some of us who've been trying to get more women into STEM and that kind of thing, to see that there's still persistence in the way this employment structure continues. And then this is age and sex for employment in all industries in Fairfield County. Pretty balanced in terms of the age groups. We don't have there's been a lot of talk about the aging of the population. In fact, these are pretty balanced in terms of age. And then arts, entertainment, and recreation, which is a lot of your industry. Although a lot of this, got a lot of young people in this industry, but they're like working at the health clubs, they're working at the golf courses. I mean, this is a pretty wide range of businesses are in this particular sector, although it certainly includes the playhouse where we're standing right now as part of this sector as well. And then demographics of employment. So, white non-Hispanic is still the largest group in Fairfield County by quite a bit, but it's definitely changing. So this is employment, all workers. This is through the fourth quarter 2022, so we're still below the pandemic, still suffering from the pandemic. That number has actually gone up now in 2023. But white non-Hispanic employment in Fairfield County, I mean, it's down. This is a 60,000 decline since 1995, right? So this is a change that's happening here in Fairfield County and throughout Connecticut. The charts for the state as a whole look pretty similar. So this is, and I apologize, but this is sort of the way the data is organized. So I hate to describe this as knots, but this is not white, not Hispanic. Not necessarily a great nomenclature, but you get the point. Up over 30,000 since 1995, and then Hispanic or Latino up 40,000 since 1995. So this is employment. One of the interesting factors around Connecticut right now is that our labor force participation rate, which is the number of people in the labor force, and being in the labor force are either working or looking for work. The number of people in the labor force is a little bit lower today than it was before the pandemic. The labor force participation rate has declined. However, for African American community and for the Hispanic populations, the labor force participation rate has increased. It was actually higher than the white labor force participation rate before the pandemic. Since the pandemic, the white labor force participation rate has declined. Black and Hispanic labor force participation has gone up, and so the gap has gotten even wider. And so that's just the reality of folks who are people of color at work. I think it's as simple as that. They work or they're looking for work. Yes?
Do you have any numbers of what the actual demographic changes of residents are for these populations that
Absolutely.
have adjusted to?
Absolutely. Hang tight. We're only at slide 15 of 34. But good question. Foreshadowing. I like that. I like that. Are you the librarian? No, he's a librarian. He knows about foreshadowing. It's good. I like it. All right. So this is employment. So from employment to population, and then we're going to get to population. So this, I know you're never going to see this. I'm sorry this is so fuzzy. So there's a very nice tool and a frustrating tool. It's a very nice tool. It's called On the Map. It's a Census Bureau product that matches place of work to place of residence. The frustrating part is the data is now only through 2020, so we're still right in the pandemic year. So I'm showing 2019, which is sort of a normal year, and then 2020, which was the pandemic year, and we can't wait to see 2021. So what this says, and I know it's hard to see, this says that, I'll just talk about 2019. You had 264,000 people live and work in Fairfield County. And then you have 150,000 people who live in Fairfield County who work somewhere else. But interestingly, even more, 154,000 people live somewhere else, come into Fairfield County to work. I was surprised by that. I think because I live in Eastern Connecticut, the stereotype is everyone in Fairfield County goes to New York every day. And that is actually not true
This might be easier. So this is the 264,000 people who live in Fairfield County, who work in Fairfield County. And then the second highest county is New Haven County, which makes sense, I guess. I mean, it's not the stereotype, right? New York County, which is Manhattan, is third. I would have, if you'd asked me, I would have guessed the opposite. But, you know, part of Fairfield County sort of borders New Haven County. It's easy to just go across the town line to go to get a job. So I find this interesting. Although you still have a lot of New York here, right? You still have thousands of people who are leaving Fairfield County to go to work in some place in New York State every day. Yes?
So I do actually remember we had another presentation on demographics, and I believe it was 2019. And there, I seem to remember that there were more people who came from New York to Stanford to work than went from Stanford to New York.
Yeah, that probably makes sense. Yes, that makes sense. Yes. And again, so maybe a little bit, again, opposite of what we would have guessed. Those of us who research genetically sort of may have a stereotype of what's really happening down here. So it's really interesting to look at the data. All right, so what's happening in Fairfield County and Connecticut? So this is total population. This is from the Census Bureau's American Community Survey. So they do a survey, 1% of the population every year. And so, you know, and I just sort of picked 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and then I put in every year. So there's why little jiggles here in the last few years. Just like the annual sample might have a little bit of noise in it. But both Connecticut and Fairfield County's growth Connecticut sort of hit a plateau around 2010 and really hasn't seen much population growth overall. Fairfield County, though, there was obviously some little glitch in here, but basically on an upward trend since 2005. And then, again, there's little noise in this data, but I thought this was interesting. So this is the current Fairfield County population of whatever you're in. How many of them were born in Connecticut? Born in the USA outside Connecticut. Now, a lot of this is, USA includes Puerto Rico. So there was actually a big influx of folks with the hurricane hit, and then some of them might have left. So, so that's, you know, we had a hurricane that caused some population movement, and they spent a year in Fairfield County and then went back. And then, no, I don't think this did not surprise me. As a guy who drives around the state all the time, the number of people who live in our state, and this is just specifically Fairfield County, so back in 2005, 185,000 people lived in Fairfield County who were born outside the USA. That's now up over like 225,000. So we have an increase in folks living here in Fairfield County who were born in some other country. So again, if you're thinking about who we want to be marketing to, you might have to think about, you know, what languages your materials are in, that kind of thing. There's change that I think is very positive for our country and for our state, and just something we just need to take advantage of in a positive way. I will tell you one very funny story. So I have to give you another story. So I live in Connecticut, in Coventry. So Manchester, which is right nearby, has seen a big increase in folks coming from India. In fact, the ball fields that I used to drive by when I was in high school, that were baseball, and now we're playing cricket. And there's this restaurant called the Marco Polo that recently went out of business. It's now an Indian restaurant. Now, my mother was thrown out of the Marco Polo in the 1970s for wearing pants. So, I am so happy. First of all, I love Indian food and revenge. You know? So the point is, this change is very positive. You know, some people get freaked out by this. We should not. We should be thrilled. My mother doesn't have to have the shame of driving by the Marco Polo anymore. You know, they're gone. All right. So, another myth I'd like to dispel here is around this idea, and I'm sorry to pick on the media here, but I often read stories about young people fleeing Connecticut. I mean, that is such not true. So this is 10 years. So this is the population of Fairfield County by age group in 2011, and then this is 2021 is the blue line. as you can see, it's just about the same. And in fact, this little bump here has sort of moved over a little bit, right? So there are, if we look at right now today, there are fewer people sort of in their 40s than there were 10 years ago, but we have more people today in their 50s than there were 10 years ago. So the people who were in their 40s, 10 years later, they're now in their 50s. How did that happen? I don't know. All right? And then I just took this line, I actually took the 2011 line, I just sort of moved it over by 10 years. And so this would say, if everybody was in Fairfield County 10 years ago, we're still here, what would the population look like? So we actually have, you know, so this is this line. So we actually have more people in their 50s today than we would if everybody had just stayed, right? And then this, you know, there is a bunch in their 60s that leave for other states like Florida. I don't know why, but they do. And then obviously there's some permanent exit. I mean, I don't know, you know, it's just, you know, 89, I mean, you know, it's you get it, right? So we're not seeing, the point is, we're not seeing this big exodus that sometimes, they always find somebody who's moving out. One of the things that is true is that it does seem that the people who move out of Connecticut often have higher incomes than the people moving in. But when you look at what's happening, you see people moving to Connecticut in their 20s and 30s without a moving van, for example, not much income, and then when they retire, they move somewhere else with, you know, the pot of gold that they made while they were here. Now, from the state budget perspective, they get freaked out because they hate to see these high taxpayers leaving the state. But from a just society perspective, that this is a place people come, make their fortune, and then go to warmer weather at the end of their career. I mean, that's not a terrible story. That's not a terrible story. That's part of what this is happening when we see some of this decline is people leaving our state for other states. And then this is just the age by, so again, it is true, right? 2021, we have quite a large, fewer number of white people in certain age groups than we did 10 years ago. We have about the same number of African Americans of every age group that we had 10 years ago, a few more in some of these age groups. And then significant, you know, this isn't a large number of folks, but there are more people of from Asia or Asian descent who self-identify as Asian. That's really what this is, that's the accurate way to say it. They self-identify as Asian on a survey with the Census Bureau. And more of them in Fairfield County today than 10 years ago. And then other, which includes 2 or more. Again, this is not a huge number of folks, but it's larger. I mean, you know, and particularly kids, right? We have more than twice as many kids today identifying, or at least when their parents are filling out the survey, identifying as some other race or 2 or more races than we had 10 years ago. So demographics are changing. And then Hispanic, again, every age group, significantly more today than there were 10 years ago here in Fairfield County. All right.
Would it be fair to say that Connecticut as a whole has gotten more diverse?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It would be definitely fair to say that. And active. Okay, so that's the demographics. I guess that's what I was asked to do. So I now want to talk about one other little thing, just because you might find it really wonderful, or you might find it annoying, or both. So the state of Connecticut had initiated, it was actually under Governor Malloy's administration, to ask the Census Bureau to start reporting data in a new way. Instead of reporting it by county, the traditional counties that have been there for over 300 years, such as Fairfield County, to start reporting the data by Council of Government region. And there's reasons for this that have to do with the councils of government wanting to be able to apply for certain federal grants that are only available to counties. And so if the Census Bureau recognizes them as a county, they'll be eligible for some of this funding. It is actually true, because Connecticut you know, we get a lot of, I've been over for state agency, we get a lot of federal grants that are available to the states. Municipalities are applying for grants all the time, maybe even one of your libraries. But the county, the funding that's available to counties has actually been impossible for Connecticut to access. So they're now reconfiguring the way the data is organized. And so the two that are sort of interest to this group, we have the Western Council of Government, which includes all these towns up through Wilton, and then there's the Greater Bridgeport, or the Metropolitan Council of Government, which is these towns here. And so there's one data set that's now available through the Census Bureau website of, for these new councils of government situations. So, again, I know you can't necessarily read this. So April 2020, that's sort of the target month for the decennial census, but they always do estimates in July. So this is the estimate for July 2020, and then July 2021, and July 2022. So we actually have data through July 2022. And as you can see, this is for the Western Planning Region, and this is the Greater Bridgeport Planning Region. You know, some employment growth since 2020. This was, you know, the real pandemic year, so it's hard to even know what those numbers mean. And then this is the age profile of, and this is about 5-year increments. So it doesn't really start to fall off till 65 to 69. So again, pretty balanced population. I guess it's interesting that we have so many more people 15 to 19 than we have 25 to 29. But this, you know, this is the age profile of the Bridgeport region, and this is the age profile of the Western Connecticut region. And then, and this is where I'm wondering, this is a brand new data set, this is right off of the Census Bureau website. It seems very strange that they would, this is the change from I used July 2020. July 2020 to July 2022, that you have in just 2 years. You know, again, this is only 500 people, this is only 1,000 people, so it's not like huge change, but this seems strange to me, the way that some of these groups have ages. So this is like 65 to 69, over 1,000 more than just 2 years ago in the Bridgeport area. Well, 45 to 49, almost 800 fewer. I don't know what to make of this. I think there may be still, they maybe still be working on it in terms of trying to get these new configurations worked out. Yes?
I can make a suggestion. From
Sure.
2020, a lot of families moved out of New York City to the suburbs
Okay.
because they were tight
Yeah.
in a small apartment with kids.
Yeah.
And they came out here and then they moved back.
And then they move back. Oh, okay. All right, well, that's possible. So anyway, we're now ready for the Q&A time. Just 2 things to mention, and I will, first of all, I figured out a way to send out the slides to everybody as soon as we work it out. I'll make sure I get those to you. Todd Benson, this is his email. He works for me. He sends out an email once a month with all of the publications that we produce in our office. And it's not a listserv, and there's no spam, and we're not going to sell your email address to anybody. So if you want to be on this distribution list, I'm happy to add you to it. It's a person, so if you ever get tired of it, you can just ask him to take you off. He'll take you off with tears in his eyes, but he'll take you off. And easy on, easy off, and it's a human being you're dealing with. I'm his boss, but Todd's great, so that'll be no problem. And then my contact information is here, and I'll be happy to, I answer this phone number when I'm in the office, and always happy to hear from folks. So, what's the format now? Questions and answers, or discussion, or?
Go ahead, any questions? I mean, broadly, everybody talks about the influx from New York City to Connecticut during the COVID years. Do you have any general comments about that?
Well, it didn't really, when I actually looked at the most up-to-date data I have is, as much as I picked on it, is this. This is 5,000 people, so 5,000 people come in. That's not trivial, but it's not changing the landscape of Fairfield County. I think that people were excited about it because there had been such this idea that people were leaving that somehow Connecticut was the place that people were leaving. And we were seeing some, you know, and I, you know, there are towns in Fairfield County, you can imagine one, you know, where there were these big houses. First of all, you know, we know what real population decline looks like, which is, you know, abandoned buildings and empty houses and all of that, right? That's not true in Connecticut. Now, what has been true in Connecticut is that there are houses in some of the nice towns right around here where you had big houses that used to have mom, dad, and 6 kids that might just have mom, you know? You know, and so that's population decline, but it's not about, it's just, you know, the kids moved off and maybe mom and dad split up and, you know, you got a big old house that's only got one person in it that used to have maybe 5 or so, right? So, which is not the same thing as people leaving, but there was this idea that people were leaving the state, and so when we had this thing that was in the opposite direction, even though I would argue it wasn't necessarily huge, it made big news, you know, because it was so contrary to the conventional wisdom that Connecticut was a place that people were fleeing. And I would argue, and I have been arguing for years, that story was never really quite true. Things may be changing, and you know, often, I self-identify as white, non-Hispanic. You know, often it's like what's happening to our group. So we see our group shrinking. You know, oh, everybody's leaving the state. You know, well, you're not counting the people coming here from India. You know, they count too. They pay taxes. They go to work. You know, in fact, they have a higher labor force participation rate than the group that you're complaining about. You know, so this is really not, you know, the problem that's out there is not really a problem in my analysis of the data. And the story about the folks moving here from New York because they were afraid of the pandemic, you know, it absolutely was true for some number of folks, but I don't think the data shows that it was as large a number of folks as might have been suggested by the news coverage.
And just to follow up.
With all due respect to our friends in the media.
Follow up.
What?
I've read any of those stories.
It's okay.
Also, in terms of since the pandemic, since you know, early 2020, has the racial profile of the influx been different from earlier?
Well, I'm going to have to just give the fudge of it's too soon to tell.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, unfortunately, the data that we get comes with such a lag that, you know, since the pandemic, and the pandemic isn't really even over yet, you know, and so we have data through 2022, and it doesn't show anything off trend, you know, I mean, you know, so, you know, if you look at, now go back to employment, which is not, this is better data in the sense that it's not survey based. So, you know, Hispanic or Latino, okay? A lot of people stopped working in 2020, you know, although we were still 60,000 Hispanics in Fairfield County were working, and then right back to trend, you know? So if you look at this line here, Fairfield County Hispanic and Latino employment, our 2022 number, which is, you know, just the end of last year, we're only in August of 23, latest data we have, sort of right back on the line we would have been on if the pandemic hadn't happened.
Uh-huh.
So that's just one, you know, I think we're in the midst of a, you know, and this is not, you know, let's see here, so total employment 420,000, Fairfield County, and so we've got, you know, 70,000 of those are Hispanic. So again, you know, it's not like Fairfield County isn't what it always was. It's just that it's a little more spicy, you know, which is great, you know. You know, this is nothing to panic over. This is just let's you know, we're seeing a change, and it's great that people want to live here. Yes.
Curious about the distinction between students hearing some people move in and they move out. Is there any substantive difference between homeowners and renters in these demographics?
Well, I mean, there's no question that the housing market has been very different than what many of us would have guessed. Right? But if in February of 2020 or March of 2020, when the pandemic was first starting, brilliant economist I am, absolutely predicted house prices were going to collapse. You know, and boy, that did not happen. And now with interest rates up higher, there's total gridlock in the homeowner market. Right? Nobody wants to, you know, prices are high. Nobody really wants to cut the price to sell it. So they just stay where they are. And so there are just a lot fewer houses on the market. So the pressure on the rental market is enormous. So I don't know what that has to do with demographics, other than everybody needs a place to live, and if you can't afford to buy a house, you gotta look for something to rent. And the demand for rental housing in Connecticut, and really throughout the country, has just gone up enormously. And some places in the country have done more to develop more rental housing than others. But, you know, if you can permit it, you can build it, you'll have tenants. You know, that's true almost everywhere right now.
In my mind, it connects to your stats about people who live and work in the county versus
Yep.
people who come from outside to work here because
Yep.
they, you know, the bar back doesn't live in Westport who works at
Right.
the restaurant next door,
Yes.
you know? So I'm just curious if there's something to learn there about audiences for prospective entities.
Well, you know, I would say from, you know, depending, which organization are you with?
Bridgeport Downtown Special Services District.
Okay, so, I mean, you know, from an arts perspective, right, I think you have to think of everybody as your potential customer, right? We will come in here to work every day, maybe you could figure out, get them to stay and see a show at night, even if they don't happen to live in Fairfield County, right? And then the people who work somewhere else, when they get home, maybe they can come see a show too, right? So from a marketing perspective, I would think you need to think about both folks. I remember when I was working in downtown Hartford for years, there were a lot of city politicians who were always bad-mouthing the commuters. And I always was offended by it. You know, so it's like, you know, and I realize their voters are, you know, they're pandering to their voters, but it's like, I come into the city, the building that I work in pays pretty good property tax, and, you know, and Connecticut even has personal property tax, they call it, so like all the computers and everything else, you know, I work for a bank, the bank has to pay property tax and all of that. And I go to the restaurants, I spend money here, like, why are commuters a problem? We're not a problem, you know, and so, you know, that's really what you gotta think about. And that's why I present, you know, I presented that partly because, you know, I usually talk about employment, but also, and then, you know, transportation becomes an issue, right? If you, although, but down, well, actually, currency is always an issue everywhere. Because let's say somebody comes to work on some kind of transportation method, well, they gotta get home before the last ride leaves, or they can't stay for a show, or can't stay to go out to dinner, before they go back. So, something else to think about as well. Yes?
You said that the councils of government were formed partly to obtain funds from the state?
No, but that's okay. Is that what I said? But-
Could you explain what they are
Sure.
exactly?
So the councils of government have existed for many years, right? They started off as the planning agencies, and then many years ago, the legislature and the governor changed their designation from being called planning regions to being called councils of government. And they're officially organized in statutes, so the mayors and the first selectmen and whoever else are part of that council of governments, and then they have some funding somehow, and often they have a staff, and some of them are more organized than others, and some of them have better participation from the towns than others. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, just that this is a result of there not being county government in Connecticut.
Right, that's right. And there's always this, you know, the pendulum swings back and forth, but sometimes there's this idea about regionalism, and like, wouldn't it be better if the regions plan better, and this and that, right? So the councils of government exist. What's changed in the last couple of years is just the way the Census Bureau is gonna be reporting the data. So instead of reporting the data by the traditional counties, here, they're gonna start reporting it based on these lines. This is a change that was requested by the state government, and which was requested, there was a Federal Register notice and hearings, I mean, there's a whole, it took some years, but it's finally actually happening. And I have mixed feelings about it, but it's all right. I work for state government, this is what we want, it's gonna be great. And so the Census Bureau is now gonna start reporting data based on these town configurations. And the idea is that, okay, the Capital Region Council of Government is very active. I mean, they have a very strong executive director, they do lots of stuff. And so Capital Region Council of Government wants to now apply for federal grants as if they're a county. They believe that because now it's sort of officially recognized in the Federal Register and by the Census Bureau, that the Capital Region Council of Governments will be eligible for this federal funding that's available only to counties. I actually don't know whether that's actually gonna be true. They really hope it is. I hope it is too. I'd love to see more federal money coming into Connecticut. So, and it's not just this, it's like, there's all sorts of federal grants, right? There's environmental protection grants, there's education grants, there's, all sorts of workforce development grants. There's like a bazillion kinds of different federal agencies that are often providing funding for a whole variety of different types of projects. And, will the Environmental Protection Agency look at a grant request from the Capital Region Council of Governments, and is this money only eligible to be for counties? They're gonna say Capital Region Council of Governments is eligible for it? I have no idea. I hope they do. But that's the goal.
And so Fairfield County has basically been split in two.
Fairfield County's been split in two. You have now Western and Metropolitan.
But it covers the same, those two councils of government covers what is
Pretty
Fairfield
much.
County.
It looks like,
Sheldon did not correct that.
yeah, the Shenanigans Valley Council of Governments picks up
Oh, right.
some Fairfield County town.
Sheldon.
Shelton?
But do we know the government structure, who manages that?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah.
For the
We
regional
work with
council
them.
of our area? Interesting, never heard of it.
So Shelton is correct. Shelton is not on either one of these lists. Shelton is part of Concord Valley.
So why couldn't Connecticut, why couldn't counties apply for this before? Why this change?
Well, there was no entity. Right, Fairfield County, which, we love Fairfield County, we're standing in it. There is no entity of Fairfield County that exists to actually submit an application. You don't have a county commission, right? Other states that have actual county government, they have a county commissioner, or, that's often the title of whoever it is, in effect, the mayor of the county, or the first selectman of the county. Fairfield County doesn't have that. Hartford County doesn't have that.
So how many other states are in this position? Is this just a Connecticut problem?
It's very much a New England issue. It's very much a New England issue. Outside of New England, it's not a problem at all. Putnam County, New York, they have some sort of administrative offices at least that can apply for grants on behalf of Putnam County, New York. Obviously the borough of Manhattan is recognized as a county. They have a borough president and they can apply, So, and then, we're all learning about the 89 counties in Iowa that Ron DeSantis is visiting today in a bus. Good luck to him, I guess. I don't know. Yes?
So this is a very, very broad question, but for us, for this community, we've generally really suffered from losing audiences since COVID. Performing arts, especially, have lost their the whole older segment have just not returned to the theatres, and there's this pressure to find new audiences. Theatres especially are in a real bind right now. Do you have any kind of general advice in terms of looking
Well,
for,
I mean,
where do we find these
actually,
organizations?
I know a lot about this industry, because my husband is a costume designer, so, and all I can say is, like, we went to see summer stock at, Goodspeed. I will tell you my age, I'm 62. I felt like I was in the young crowd. With all due respect to people who are older than me, and, I love them all, but, I mean, that's just looking around the audience, at 62, I felt I was in the young crowd at Goodspeed. Nobody's here disagreeing with me, or is even offended, right? I mean, it's true, right? What? So, and, so we actually have young people in our state. I think the demographic, this idea that young people fleeing our state is, I hope I've disproved that. The younger population may look a little different than the older population in terms of their background. And, it's really hard, I mean, I've been part of many organizations that, like, they look around, everybody looks like, oh, we need more African Americans in this group. Well, how's a white guy from Coventry gonna do, I mean, like, I'm not saying we can't do it, in fact, we have to do it. But it's not gonna happen in a room like this with, we have to actually go to where the people are. I mean, I know that sounds like a cliche, but it's true, fortunately, Labor Department I work for, we have tremendous breadth of talent and, different and diversity in our workforce. So fortunately, I have colleagues who are from a wide variety of backgrounds, and that's fantastic. And obviously our customers come from all walks of life. Although even there, we're trying to figure out, we know that there's some disparity in who accesses unemployment insurance based on race and other categories. And that's actually on our agenda for this year, to really try to figure that out, what's going on. Because we feel we serve everybody equally, but yet the data shows some people are being left out. And we're working on that ourselves. So the Labor Department, we're working on it, this group needs to work on it. The future is, as Yogi Berra would say, the future ain't what it used to be here, something like that, right? You just gotta, it's tough. It's tough because we're, again, go back to the Goodspeed crowd. I mean, I bet those people have been there for a long time. Like 20 years ago, they were in the young crowd. They're still going, so that's loyalty. We want to reward loyalty, but why aren't there people coming in behind them? I don't know. That's the trick. Yes.
I have a question about, I think it's an earlier slide where you have the demographics by age in the county, and there was a shift from 2011 to 2022, from like 40s to 50s.
All right, so this is the, yep.
So, I'm curious because I know in like the suburbs around here, a lot of people move here for the schools, like where you
Yep.
live. So, as people are having kids later, are the peaks of like when people are moving here changing as well over time? So does that mean that the older age ranges are still involved with kids in schools longer than they used to be?
Well, I mean, that is certainly true. I mean, we know that the average age of the first child has gotten higher and higher.
Yeah.
So that means those kids are in school. You're absolutely right.
So then are those people also moving out here later?
Well, I mean, all I can say, this line, to me, so the red line is 2021 age profile, the blue line is 2021 age profile. So 10-year difference. And I just don't see a huge change. I mean, you have more people in their 60s, more people in their 50s, about the same number of people in their 30s, and fewer people in their 40s. But it's part of that. You just had you just have a demographic bubble that the people in their 40s have now moved on into their 50s.
So, no, it's not, it's, the reality is, it's always, I'm an economist, so we always think at the margin, so the people moving in and out are really important. But when you just think about the age profile of the county, it's really just the people who were here 10 years ago are now 10 years older. Most people haven't moved. Most people haven't moved. So, they've just got older, And then what is encouraging, okay, the number of people under 10 is perhaps a little bit less, but not by much, and the number of people in their 20s is actually a little higher than 10 years ago. So, it's mostly just the in and outs have kind of washed each other out.
Okay. One last question, I think, then we need to.
It was really more of a statement, I guess. I guess I'm encouraged to see that the demographics haven't really changed in terms of the number of older people leaving. That would account for the difference in the attendance. But what does occur to me is that there's a tremendous cultural shift in the different demographic segments. When I was young, having a piano in a household was a tremendous status symbol. Today, you can't get rid of them. Nobody wants them. And so I think the theaters and the museums really need to think about, it's not, how do I attract the 30 and 40 and maybe even the 50-year-old to want what I have, but to really get at what it is they want, which may not be theater like this.
Exactly.
Because they're not really coming, they don't have that same obligation, and it's across the board. It's across the board. It's the religious institutions, and it's the theaters, and it's the museums. It's a totally different group of people and what they want out of life.
I would add to that though, arts education has been gutted,
Right.
So
Yeah.
how many kids know how to play a piano?
Right.
You know,
Guitar is guitar because it's smaller and it's, that seems to be holding its own.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But
I-
advocating for arts funding in schools would, I think,
I get it.
go a long way.
Creates demand.
I think that's a really good point. that
But it
because
doesn't
schools
bring
are
to
no
the
longer
college.
teaching music appreciation,
The
and
colleges,
they're not teaching art, and they're not teaching, they're not giving lessons.
Yeah.
Kids don't even know about theater.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I learned to play the viola in Case Highway,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Westport is not true for that. Bridgeport might be in maybe Norwalk a little bit, but Westport has incredible arts.
Right.
right?
So much so that a lot of kids don't need to come to say Westport School of Music, because they're kicking so much at Staples or at the elementary school. So it's
It's very uneven, and now it's.
But it's a lot of parents that have not a clue about arts education, because they were kids in the 80s when those arts programs were cut from other states, and
See?
the education isn't there from the parents.
So one bonus last question, Paige. Then we.
I'm gonna be the devil in the room and just say that I personally think that young people in their 20s, especially, engage in the world. And they are the generation that have grown up with the internet, inside a world of education. And they are living their lives with art in their lives. They're the ones who are activists. They're the ones who are creating murals and getting out into the streets and dancing and doing art and including it in their lives. We need to understand that these are the demographic that understand and live engagement to its soul. And I think that providing arts education may be changing in the sense that these people live it, they breathe it, and they eat it. They digest it. They understand having art in their lives. They understand, and they're always discovering new music, and they're going out and they're doing things. And I think they look at us and just say, well, why would I want to go to your institution? Why would I want to become a member? I mean, we always talk about membership as like the death misnomer of a younger generation. They see belonging in the sense that we consider belonging as being confining, versus being part of the larger larger world. And I think if there's something that we can learn from it, creating and using these beautiful venues as places of experience versus just coming to digest.
Right. So we really have, the need is for us to really work at transforming what we're doing to meet the kind of richness of interest and experience of
Yeah, and I think even an older demographic, they're out hiking now. People in their 60s and 70s, they're doing things and living life differently than their generations that just passed. I don't know, I think that, I look at it as a very exciting time. It's nerve-wracking, but it's always nerve-wracking before the next big thing,
That's right.
right?
Right.
That's great. I think on that note we need to close, so thank you, Patrick, very much indeed for your presentation. And I promise we'll get the slides out to you today, tomorrow, and we'll have the video available shortly afterwards. So there is coffee and donuts, and you're welcome to stay for a short while longer.